Hello and welcome to Nikolay's genetics lessons, and today's question is: in a certain African population, 4% of the population is born with sickle cell anemia, which is caused by homozygous recessive condition. Calculate the percentage of individuals who enjoy the selective advantage of the sickle cell gene, increased resistance to malaria. This is classical Hardy-Weinberg problem, so we are going to use Hardy-Weinberg formula in order to solve this problem. So p squared plus 2pq plus q squared all equals 1. And p squared here stands for the homozygous dominant genotype, 2pq stands for the heterozygous genotype, and q squared stands for the homozygous recessive genotype. According to our problem, we know that 4% of the population is born with sickle cell anemia and belong to the genotype which is small a homozygous recessive. So you have to understand that these two genotypes would make one phenotype, and this one is going to make another phenotype, which in our case means that a person who belongs to this genotype would be affected. And according to our problem, we know that 4% in this population belong to this genotype and phenotype and express this genetic disorder. And that also means that the rest in this population would be 96% are going to belong to these two genotypes. And if we add these two numbers, we are going to get 100%. So all calculations that we are doing on the scale between 0 and 1. And as you see, the numbers we are given are on the different scale in percentage form on the scale between 0 and 100%. But in statistics, and this is statistical problem, we usually work with numbers between 0 and 1, where 1 equals to 100%. And on this scale, 4% is going to be 0.04. And for example, 96% would equal to 0.96. Again, if we combine these numbers, we are going to get 1, just like we see here. Now take a look. We have two phenotypes here, normal and affected. And we have three genotypes: homozygous dominant, heterozygous, and homozygous recessive. But these three genotypes are made by only two alleles: dominant allele A and recessive allele A. So now we have to find frequency of the recessive allele A. So in our formula, q squared stands for the frequency of the genotype small a homozygous recessive. So in order to find the frequency of the allele A, we also can say that A times A. So we have to take just a square root of q squared. And if q squared equal to 0.04, then our answer is going to be 0.2. So frequency of the A allele is going to be 0.2. And we also can say this is q. In our formula it's q, but it is equal to frequency of the allele A. Some people prefer to use these letters instead of these letters. We also know that in this population we have only two alleles, P and Q, and these two alleles make 100% of alleles. Only two alleles, no any other alleles. And for P it is dominant allele A, for Q it is recessive allele A. And we have found the frequency of the recessive allele A, which is 0.2. And now we can find frequency of the dominant allele A, or P. So 1 minus 0.2 is going to be 0.8. So 0.8 we put here. This is frequency of the dominant allele P. Now let's return to our question. Calculate the percentage of individuals who enjoy the selective advantage of the sickle cell gene. And that means the question asks the percent of the people who belong to this group. So they have one normal allele and one defective. But having such genotype in Africa is advantageable to, for example, this genotype, because this genotype protects from sickle cell anemia. So we just have to use this part of the formula. So 2pq equals to, and pq stands for the heterozygous genotype. So equals to frequency of p, and we have found 0.8 times frequency of the allele q, which is 0.2, and times 2. So we can put 2 here. And what we are going to get, 0.8 times 0.2 is going to be 0.16, times 2 is going to be 0.32. And if we need an answer in percentage form, we just have to multiply by 100, and we are going to get 32%. And this is going to be our answer. People who belong to the heterozygous genotype in this population would be 32%. And we also can find frequency of the homozygous dominant genotype. We just have to multiply 0.8 by 0.8. Again, if we need an answer in percent form on this scale, that means that we have to multiply by 100. And our answer is going to be 64% for the homozygous dominant genotype. And we also can check our calculations. So 64% plus 32% plus 4%, and we are going to get 100%. So everything is correct. And this is all for today. Subscribe and see you in the next video. Goodbye.